Excellent. So obviously I'm Brandon Checketts. I'm a founder of Seller Labs, and I've been working on our sponsored product tool for the last 6 months or so. So really excited about all the progress we've made on that and everything we've learned about it. We've been sharing a lot about this stuff and everything. So just to start off, how many people are using sponsored product ads right now? It looks like most of the audience. How many people are using AMS, Amazon Marketing Services ads right now? So half dozen of you, maybe a little bit more. Okay. We're going to talk mostly about sponsored products, but touch on AMS a little bit as well, because they're both great methods to advertise stuff. So I might go through some of these slides pretty quickly because some of it's fairly beginnerish. So we'll skip through them and see where we end up. But so background, we're going to skip through over a lot of stuff. We have some resources available at this URL, sellerlabs.com/ppc. Some videos we've done on it, some blog posts and things are on there. So if you want to catch up a little bit or review some things. I want to talk really quickly about why you want to advertise if it's not obvious. Sponsored products and sales and advertising in general helps you to generate sales. If you have new products that you're launching, obviously with the change that Amazon did last year, launching new products is a little bit more difficult than it used to be. Sponsored products is a way to get some of that sales velocity and to help you build those initial reviews is those organic sales and those sponsored product sales buy products. They're going to leave reviews at a much lower rate, obviously, than if they were than was previously available, but those do lead to initial reviews. Most people, we've heard talk today from Eric and I think yesterday from Peter, several people talk about this sort of halo effect that happens as you use sponsored products to drive advertising sales. There's this halo effect that flows over into organic search results and everything. So as you advertise and get sales from sponsored products, those keywords and the sales velocity that comes from those has this halo effect that drives more organic search results as well. And then for those that sell consumable goods, any kind of that kind of stuff, sponsored products is a great way to acquire customers, new customers hopefully for you. And then in general, like advertising just helps you to sell more stuff. So if you've got profit margin built into there, you understand what your profit margin is, you understand how much you have to advertise, you can just sell more stuff. And just think of advertising as a cost to help you sell that stuff. So sponsored products are really important because they're so prevalent right now on Amazon's site. So right now you're probably familiar with search results at the top of the search results page. Usually 3 or 4 of the top search results there are sponsored products. At the bottom of the page, there's 4 more of them. On competitors' product detail pages, right below kind of the main body of the content, above the description, sponsored product shows there, which is this endless scrollable type of thing there that shows sponsored product ads there. So you're displaying your product on other people's product pages. On the mobile website, it's pretty prevalent as well. So on the mobile website, you get the top couple of search results. Again, placement on the product detail page. On the mobile app, it's not quite as prevalent on the mobile app. I think when I did my example here, it was only the top search result on the mobile app, so a little bit less prevalent inside their application. And then we'll talk about some more of them too. Any questions so far about campaign or about sponsored products, why they're important, why you should be using them? All right, good. So I'm going to talk about organization. So is everybody familiar with, let's do it this way, how many people are not familiar with sort of ad groups and campaigns? Is most people familiar with this terminology? So I'm going to skip over this fairly quickly, I guess. But I do want to point out that campaigns is kind of the big thing. Campaigns contain campaigns contain ad groups. And then inside the ad group, you specify your products that you want to advertise in there and your keywords that exist inside there. And then you can set negative keywords at both the ad group level and the campaign level. So that's just a real quick anatomy of how the data model is structured. The important thing to note here is that the campaign level is where you specify daily budgets. So if you want to have controls on how much you spent, that's done always at the campaign level. The ad group is mostly just a container for containing things. You can specify a default bid, but that's just kind of a default, not really not really unique. So the ad group I kind of think of as just a container to contain keywords for the most part. This kind of goes through that. Campaign level is daily budgets and stuff. You do specify the targeting type at the campaign level, so the automatic targeting versus manual targeted campaigns. That happens all the way up at the top campaign level. At the ad groups, this is, like I said, just kind of a container for other things, mainly grouping keywords together. And then keywords are really where we spend a lot of time and effort talking about keywords. The keywords are really the things that you as a seller specify. You want to create bids on keywords. You want to specify your match types, We're going to get into a little bit more detail about this. And then negative keywords sort of do sort of what it sounds like, because they are kind of the opposite or the inverse of a keyword. So if you have an apple slicer is the keyword example we're going to use throughout here. If you're advertising an apple slicer and you use an exact negative match type of purple apple slicer, that's kind of the effect of advertising on all the other apple slicer keywords except for purple apple slicer. So the negative ones just kind of act as a negative or a blacklist type of functionality. So that kind of sums up the structure. Again, that was like a 30-second version of this because I want to leave plenty of time. Any questions about campaign structure or organization, how that works? Y'all are sponsored product geniuses already. Excellent. All right, so I want to make one subtle distinction. When we're talking about a lot of these things, there's a subtle distinction between what a keyword is and what a user search term is. So we're talking about, in terms of keywords, those are the things that we as the seller or the advertiser specify. So we might specify a broad match apple slicer keyword. And there's a couple important things about that. The broad match term apple slicer is going to match up to a whole bunch of user search terms. So if I've specified, I want to bid on the broad match term apple slicer, and I want to bid on that at $1, then I might get a whole bunch of impressions and stuff. I'll start seeing stuff in my report, the things that the users are actually searching for, those user search terms. I'll see all kinds of stuff in there that has to do with apple slicers, but they could be red apple slicers or metal apple slicers or slicers for apples or all kinds of other things. So the search terms are really the things the buyers are searching for, and they're matched up against your keywords. So you as the seller specify the keywords, but the users are searching for the search terms. That's the most simplest way to see it, to think about it. And then in terms, when you're looking at it in reports or on screens and stuff, the keywords will always have, or should almost always have, a match type next to them. So when we're talking about keywords, you'll almost always see that it says broad, phrase, or exact next to a keyword. And if it says broad, phrase, or exact next to it, we're almost always talking about a keyword instead of a search term. So there's different kind of reports and different kind of screens that they both contain strings like apple slicer or water bottle. They look like they're kind of interchangeable, but there's a subtle difference there to understand between them. So digging into keywords just a little bit, I don't think I did those. So these are a real quick example of the 3 types of match types we have. So again, I used my apple slicer example here. I want to start kind of in the middle here, or the bottom one, where the most exact one is the apple slicer. And you can see all the examples we have on there contain the word apple and slicer right next to each other. But it does include a few common misspellings and some pluralizations and some things like that. So the exact match is not really exact. It's like very close match, might be a better term for it, but it doesn't quite roll off the tongue as well. So exact match contains the most specific types of things we can do. Now, if we roll up a level, go to the phrase match one for apple slicer. In those, you'll see that the word apple slicer appears next to each other in all cases, but it has extra words at the beginning or at the end. So I've got red apple slicers metal, green apple slicers, 8-piece apple slicer. We can still have the same sort of misspellings and pluralizations in there too. But the phrase match just means apple slicer needs to appear next to each other, but it has extra words on it. And phrase match is a really common one that works really well. And then the broader one, called broad, obviously, is the broadest one we have ability to specify here is the broad match apple slicer. And in that one, you'll see it includes everything that was included in the other ones. So I should have mentioned that the phrase match includes, if you set a phrase match keyword up, it'll include everything that the same exact match keyword does. Similarly, the broad one will contain, if you set up a broad match, it will contain everything in the other 2. But the broad match ones just need to have the word apple and slicer in the keywords, but not necessarily in that order, and just a little bit broad. So I kind of came with a little contrived case there is slice case for Apple iPhone 6s. So that would be something that doesn't really fit. Like that's obviously not a Apple slicer, that's a case for an Apple phone. But the broad match term tends to be broader, and so you get some of that kind of stuff in there that's not really what people are wanting to buy. So far, so good? Excellent, cool. So Jeff and I like to talk about this quite a bit, and when I talk about it as sponsored products, it's sort of an art and a science, because there's a lot of scientific or data-driven things we can do about this. We get a lot of metrics about it. We get a lot of reports and Excel data. So that part of it is kind of the scientific side of it. We can do a lot of analysis on these numbers. There's also a lot of an artistic side to it, too. So you have to use some of your human intuition to know that an apple is also a brand of a manufacturer of cell phones and iPads and stuff. So you don't want to bid on Apple because that's way too broad. You also don't want to bid broad to specify way too specific. So there's kind of an art to it, trying to figure out where the right place to draw some of these boundaries is. So the art side of it is there's not really always a right way to do things. It's a little bit difficult to define, like here's step 1 through 7 that you follow and it's going to work every time. You kind of have to understand how everything works and understand how it all fits together. And you have to kind of balance that with your own knowledge, your own human intuition, your own business rules that you want to follow and everything. So again, the science side is like we do have some hard data around here, so the science helps us make these decisions. So it's always kind of a balancing act between those two things to figure out when we're making decisions. So like I said, I've spent the last 6 months building a tool called Ignite, and so I want to dive kind of into that because it makes a lot of this stuff. Essentially what we built with Ignite is we talked to pretty much all the major influencers, the major consultants, and the people that made courses about how they set up sponsored product campaigns. We sort of summarized all that and sort of built it into this tool. So it makes it kind of implements a lot of the best practices. It makes it easy to set this stuff up. It makes it a much better interface. If you all are familiar with like the keyword reports and stuff you get out of Seller Central right now, you generally have to be kind of an Excel guru to like go in there, download a report, put it into your thing, filter on the columns. Some of that stuff's fairly basic Excel, and then copy and pasting stuff back from Excel back into, it's just kind of a pain. So our Ignite tool kind of just does all that and integrates it together. So we integrate directly with the Amazon API, so there's no more downloading spreadsheets or anything like that. We pull that data from Amazon as soon as it's available each day. And then we're also implementing some best practices as far as how to organize your campaigns, set up your ad groups, that kind of stuff. And we're building out our suggestion algorithms to start to like use some of that machine learning, some of that expert sort of knowledge that we've learned and build it into suggestions into the tool. So I just want to jump into this. I actually had a bunch of slides about that, but the slides get kind of stale, so I'm going to actually hop over and just show it to you in real time here. So this is a test campaign and a test account I set up.
Hey, Brandon, before you jump in, let me see if we've kept everybody on the same page.
Go for it.
So one of the things about sponsored product ads is that some people are experts, right? And some people are total novices. And it's very difficult when we were putting this together to try to figure out at which level we needed to be. So did everything kind of up to this point make sense? Because Brandon went through a ton of information in 15 minutes. You're all nodding your head, yes, that's awesome. All right, cool.
Don't feel bad to say no, because we can.
Yeah, and we do have detailed videos that goes, if you have staff that does this for you, or you got a little bit lost, we actually have detailed videos on most of those concepts that will walk you through all the parts of that. Like, we just did it all in 15 minutes, which was awesome that you did.
We've done it in,
we've done it in an hour on each of those topics. Okay, so we have the in-depth if you want the more in-depth version. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page before we jumped into the execution of this.
You told me we're supposed to be advanced in this conference.
Yes, so I know. I just wanted to make sure.
We're gonna assume that it sounds like most people have run this kind of stuff before. So this is kind of the interface we have so far. I'm just gonna start showing how to create a campaign and sort of show some of the things that it does. To do that, again, most of these best practices are not really, but you don't necessarily have to have our tool to do it, but it kind of builds a lot of that stuff in so that you can't. One of the things we were talking to Mike Ziegler, who was actually on the sponsored product team when they created it, was you spend about 90% of your time like optimizing the campaign. So spend a little bit of time on the front end setting it up and making sure that it works, that it's organized right, and that's going to save you a lot of time down the road. So essentially what you do on this side is we go in and we're going to select the products that we want to advertise. So we actually connect to we pull in all your listings and stuff from your MWS stuff and get all your products in here. So I'm just going to pick some random book that happens to be selling here. I'm going to add this to the thing I'm going to advertise. And then I click on, you can add as many products as you want here. We're also going to pull in all your product variations as well. So if you just have a bunch of variations, just add one of them, and then we'll pull in all the variations as well, so you don't have to specify all those exactly. So the first step is kind of selecting the products you want to do. The second part, we kind of say what campaigns and budgets do you want to set up. So I'm going to just put in some stuff here. This is just a name to put for it. In Ignite, we're going to build a bunch of suggestions and metrics around a target ACOS goal, so you can set that in here. I'm going to just put 25% for the time being. Now, what we do on some of this stuff is kind of group different campaigns together. So we can group automatic targeted campaigns with manual targeted campaigns, and then take some of the stuff we learn from one and move it to the other and keep the history intact. So some people, well, we can talk more about in some of the questions probably, like if you want to set up an automatic targeted campaign or not, you can do that. You just specify a budget basically if you want to do that. You can create a manual targeted campaign. You can actually link to existing campaigns that you have as well, and you specify essentially a daily budget there. So again, this is just the sort of the setup process, getting everything going. The next step is going to ask us how we want to organize our ad groups, and so we suggest, looks a little bit funky on this small screen, we suggest creating 3 different ad groups, one for broad, one for phrase, one for exact matches. And there's some reasoning for that that allows us to do some kind of fancy stuff in the long term. But this is going to basically set up those suggested ad groups, and you can specify the bid amount that you want here. We're going to build a little bit more sophistication around this. Some of our other screens have got more detail and suggested bids on here as well. And then one of the really cool things we're doing here is we're using our keyword database that we've actually, so we know what keywords that this particular product I selected already ranks for. It was a book on something. I forget what the book was about, but we hit our keyword database, the same database that Scope uses, and figured out what keywords or where this product is already ranking. And we've kind of selected a bunch of keywords that are already in there. So this is a really good shortcutting step to how you used to run sponsored product stuff. The recommendation used to be to run an automatic targeted campaign for 7 to 30 days or so and gather some of this keyword data. But since we have this awesome Scope database right there with all of our keyword information in it, Ignite's utilizing the same database, and it can tell you all the keywords for which you already rank. And so you can sort of sort this by the score, which is kind of a measure of how important the keyword is or how frequently searched it is, or your position on it, and you can specify how you want to bid on each one of these. So the question was asked, which one's more important, the keyword, the position, or the score? It kind of depends. It's really a mix of both. The score is going to be more high velocity stuff, so you can expect to have more impressions from those. But if I rank really, really poorly for something, if I rank on position, I think some of these are probably position 22, I've seen some of them position 80. Like if I rank really, really poorly for a term, I'm probably not going to, if I spend money advertising, I'm going to expect relatively poor results for that. So I would tend to find stuff that is both a high score and a low position. So a score of 60 and a position of 6 is probably something that's I'm pretty relevant for. I rank at position 6 for that already, and a score of 60 means that there's going to be a pretty good number of searches for it. This one that's a position of 19 might mean it's more competitive. This is not going to be a great example because I don't have a real product here. This is some book that I just happen to have. So, but if we can look at it with your products, and you'll find a lot of more keywords that are a lot more relevant. The other thing that we can do is after we've created the campaign, you can select a competitor's product or put in an ASIN from a similar product and find all the keywords for which that one's selling and use these keywords in the same manner too. And another thing that we're doing here too is we're kind of deduplicating or taking away overlapping keywords. And I don't see any examples in this result set. Well, here's one right here. So mini monkeys. It's suggesting we don't bid on mini monkeys. Probably because we already bid on mini monkey up here. It's seeing that those are the same term, essentially. One's a plural of the other. And so don't necessarily bid on both, because then it kind of divides your data between two different really similar things. Excuse me. And so one of the things that we've learned from doing this for a while is people used to do is go into a tool and select as many keywords as they can and bid on all of them. But what we find with that is when you have a limited daily budget, you end up spending your budget across all these 100 keywords, and you get 3 clicks here and 1 click here and 2 clicks there, and then it's really hard to make a decision. Like, is that working? Well, with 3 clicks and no sales, maybe it's not working, but it was only 3 clicks. I can't really tell. And so what we're suggesting is trying to keep the keywords broad and try to avoid the ones that overlap. And so if I'm selling apple slicers, I want to bid on the term apple slicer, but I don't want to bid on red apple slicer, because the red apple slicer, it might be a good term, but it's going to take away volume from the more broad term. And I want more density around the data initially to figure out, is apple slicer a good term for me? And then once we've run and have data on that term for a while, we'll be able to see, like, red apple slicer is going to be included in that one. And so we can see if red apple slicer has a high velocity or a much better conversion rate. and we've got data to support it, and then we can start making it into a more specific match type. So that's a lot of stuff to cover with that. Let me finish the campaign creation part. This is the last step of it, really. So I'm going to just hit, let's see, I got my keyword selected, and then I just hit create. And it's going to give me a summary, and then it actually goes into Amazon and creates all this stuff in real time as well. So let me pause there for a moment. Does anyone have any questions for that point? Is it just late in the day? Am I getting tired?
One of the things you said, you talked about adding competitor keywords.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I'll show you where you can do that. So the question was about adding keywords from a competitor's product. So I'm going to hop over to another listing that I have. So this is actually a kind of a strange account. I just took one of my brother's account actually and made everything say apple slicer on it. So so it's going to be a little bit weird as I dig into this, but it does have like some of the actual charts and data that we can show. And so what I would do in order to add one of the competitors' products, I go into one of my campaigns. And there's a tab inside of here that says add keywords. Gotta navigate to it. So here's my add keywords tab. And let me go over to Amazon and find an ASIN for another product that's a competitor. So this is the top ranked apple slicer right now. So I'm going to click on it and use this ASIN. And when I go over to add keywords, I can put in a competitor's ASIN right here. And when I do suggest keywords off of that, it's going to come back and say, it's going to hit our keyword database, and it's going to find all these keywords that are specific to that particular product. So this is a lot more specific than my previous one with some random book. But you can see all these keywords are apple slicer related. And so these are, a really good data set of stuff to start to look at for competitors. Yeah, exactly. So. Are those keywords that your competitor is ranking for on the first page? Well, it could be any page. So the position 1 on these means that the first position on the first page, but the position probably goes up to, the position goes up to 18. So that's probably on the second page for some things. So I think we go about 3 pages deep on some of these, on most of these. So and 5 pages deep on others, depending on where we got the data from or how important we think a keyword was. So. Go ahead back here.
Yeah, so the search terms, how are you going to add those to your campaign?
So just basically right here, you can click on the buttons. So it kind of defaults to don't add on all of them, but I could just go through here and click on broad. Okay. Yeah, so the question is how do I add search terms to bid on those, right? So the only way to bid on like a search term is to bid on it kind of like an exact match. That's as close as you can get. And the exact match will still roll up to several things underneath it. But so you can do them manually. If you find them from a competitor ASIN like this, adding them here is an example of that. You're talking about if you want to view a report sort of and grab them from there. Let's touch on the report here in just a second then. On the competitor product here, does this make sense to everybody? Is that useful, hopefully? All right, sweet. So I'm going to jump over into some of the reports then. So this is actually a campaign that's been running for a while. And you can see this is actually going to have not apple slicer sort of keywords with it now. So, but you can see that this is an outdoor product and that kind of stuff. So this is pulled down a bunch of reports for the product. It's got these are the keywords which we're already bidding on. And this number right here is the total number of user search terms that are encompassed within that keyword, right? So this one, the yard, I found on here, there's actually 1,308 user search terms that contain the word the yard in some way, shape, or form. And so I can click on the yard right here, and this is kind of like downloading that search term report, putting it in Excel and filtering by the yard keyword. And then I can find out on here, these are all the different variations of the yard that we're all encompassing. So these are all the user search terms that we have. And so from here, I can start to filter on this. I can say, find me things that have 2 clicks, and well, let's do something maybe, well, let me start out and say, let's find stuff that had 10 clicks and zero revenue, right? That might be stuff that I'm spending a bunch of money on that hasn't resulted in any sales yet. And I don't know if that's going to come up with anything or not. It found nothing on there that met that, oh no, yeah, it didn't find anything that met that criteria. We've got a couple of these pre-built filters on here as well that kind of do that say these are unprofitable ones that I'm spending more money on. I don't know if I have any examples of some of these, but this is just pre-populating some of these filters. 5 clicks with a lower than 0.5% conversion rate or click-through rate. Good performers might be one that might have some stuff. But it's kind of all that stuff you would pull back into Excel. And then let me actually just clear all the filters. You can also sort on all the columns as well. So one of the things that we might find out of this is like this, I'm going to actually sort by the clicks. And so these are the ones, so I've only got 2 clicks on some of these. And I can scroll over here, and so neither of these has resulted in any conversions or anything yet. So the kind of nice thing we can do here is we can actually say if this is yard Jenga, if I looked at this and determined for whatever reason this wasn't something I wanted to bid on, I could click on it and I could set it as a negative keyword here, which is going to prevent me from bidding on it in the future. So that's kind of just a functionality that we built right into there in order to do it. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the difference in your exact or
Okay, yeah, so the question is, what's the difference between an exact and a phrase match on the negative side? It uses the same algorithm essentially, so if I do an exact match for yard Jenga in here, it's only going to do yard Jenga and yard Jengas and yards Jenga, like the very specific ones. If I do it as a negative phrase match, which might be a better case if like I know that like this thing has nothing to do with Jenga, then I might do it as a phrase match to say like I don't want red yard Jengas or red yard Jengas big. It's going to be a little bit, the phrase match is more broad than the exact, so. Yeah, so it sets an exact on either one of those. In most cases, I would say, like, if it's a very specific term, you can set it as an exact. If it's one of these things like, maybe my thing is not 36 by 36 or whatever, and I just want to say I don't want to include that one at all, I'd set that as a phrase match to exclude kind of everything and everything related to it. So, any question over here with you guys? Yeah, so if you have an exact, so the good question, the question is if you have existing campaigns, will it pull in the data? And so we use the Amazon Sponsored Products API, and it pulls in up to 60 days worth of data from the present date. So we go back 60 days, and then we save that data forever. So your data goes back right now from May 3rd back to March 3rd, and we'll always have data back through March 3rd, and we keep accumulating it, so. No, we'll always have data back through March 3rd. So tomorrow we're going to have 61 days worth of data. The day after it's going to be 62 days worth of data. So we never delete stuff from our system, but we can't recreate what Amazon's already expired. So, but it does continue to accumulate that, which is actually really important because on the Amazon side, like it's after 60 days, it's gone and you can't see it anymore. But your conversion rate doesn't necessarily, if you have some longer tail key terms that you're getting one click a week on it or something, and over 60 days you get 10 clicks or something like that, like that's starting to build up data, and the more clicks you have, the more informed decision you can make. And so if you can accumulate that data for longer, you can make better decisions. So, good question, thanks.
was it pulling in those campaigns or just the data on the keywords?
So we're pulling down, we actually we pull in both of those actually. So the question is what data, I guess kind of broadly, what data do we pull in? So we're pulling in all your campaign organization stuff. So you sign up and authorize your sponsored product campaign, and we're going to suck down and pull on all your campaign setup, all your keywords, all your negative keywords, all your product ads. That's all just going to appear in Ignite within a matter of 15, 20 minutes in most cases, unless you've got some really big accounts. And then it takes a little bit longer for us to pull in all the historic data. So we go through every day and request reports for every day, and that takes an hour or two in some cases. But then we've got all the data, and we just refresh it every 6 hours, I think, right now. So you can actually make campaigns on sponsored products on the Seller Central interface, and we'll notice them in Ignite within about 6 hours. We refresh that data occasionally. But if you make changes within Ignite, it's pushed immediately to sponsored products. So, cool. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so let me get to that, and let me actually hop back to my slides. I think I talked about some of the suggestions as well. Let's see. So I covered some of that kind of stuff. So suggestions is what I was going to talk about next, so thanks for leading into that. So like I said, we have this concept of suggestions, and the suggestions take time to accumulate. So what we do is we actually kind of use some what what we're calling a confidence interval and a importance interval. And so after we pull in all the new data from Amazon every day, we run through a bunch of suggestion algorithms. And for each suggestion, we come up with some sort of confidence level in it, right? So the more data we have, the better our confidence level is. So if we only have 10 clicks on something and we're suggesting changing a bid, we're not going to be extremely confident in just 10 clicks. It might be like a 30 confidence or something. But if we have 200 data points to look at and you've got 200 clicks, we can be more confident in that decision. So you'll see a confidence in the 90 range or something. And then on the same sort of thing, we have this another term called importance. So the importance is like, what's the business, how much dollar impact does this have in my business? And if it has a large dollar impact, it'll have more importance. And if it's just kind of a nice thing, like archive a keyword, it's not really costing you any money, that has a lower importance. And so we generate suggestions, and every suggestion has a confidence level and an importance level. And then we're surfacing those. This is an example of a screenshot of one. So this particular one says this keyword, so the suggestion here is to archive the keyword apple corer. And corer is misspelled, actually. It says this keyword was created 52 days ago, hasn't received any impressions, so this user search term might be included in a more broadly defined keyword, or Amazon might not think that this keyword applies to your product. So the suggestion in this case is to archive the keyword. You can see the importance says 70 because it's not doing anything really. And then with every suggestion, we have the ability to accept it, to reject it, or to delay it by some number of days. And so if you wanted to say, yeah, that's cool, I don't want to make that decision right now, I can delay it by a week or something. If you want to accept it, you click accept, and it just does it automatically. And if you hit reject, it'll reject it, and you'll never see it again. So the other suggestions that we have built in right now are ones that are talking about moving a keyword from a phrase match to an exact match. So if we've noticed a term that's, like in the apple slicer example, we might have a phrase match for apple slicer, but we might notice the term red apple slicer has a lot of impressions, or it's got a really good conversion rate or something. Or it might have a really bad conversion rate. So maybe we're selling a metal apple slicer, and somebody wants to buy a platinum apple slicer or something. Like ours isn't platinum, so it's got a poor conversion rate. In this example, that might be what it is reduce our bid from $2 to 89 cents. In this case, what Ignite has done is it's done the math. It says this is based on 74 clicks in the past 15 days. This is how much it costs. This was my conversion rate. You can see the ACoS on this was 28.6%. And it's trying to hit our target ACoS, I think, of 20% or something like that. So it suggests reduce the bid to 89 cents, and that will get you to where you want to be.
Hey, Brandon, can I jump in?
Go for it.
So this is where whether you're going to use Ignite or whether you're going to do this on your own, this is where you as a business owner need to balance the art and the science, right? So when we were developing this product, Brandon kept saying, but there's not enough data to make that decision. There's not enough data to make that decision. And in a lot of cases, there's not enough data to make that decision. And so as a business owner, this goes back to I guess this is a good full circle. This goes back to our original conversation on day one. Like, statistically, it needs to be a certain amount of data to give you confidence in a decision that you're making. But as a business owner, you've got to decide what your own metrics are. So there are some people that do things based on impressions and clicks, and very few, 2, 3 clicks, they'll start moving things over from a broad to a phrase to an exact. And so as a business owner, this is not a one-size-fits-all type of process. And it's something that's probably one of the biggest questions if we were to call Brad up, which you're welcome to grab a mic and talk about what other customers are saying, because Brad deals with the customers who have a lot of the problems, or a lot of the challenges with using sponsored product ads, is they want it to be like Feedback Genius. They want to be able to just come in and fill out 5 lines and hit a button and set it and forget it. But sponsored ads don't work that way. And so you have to ultimately come up with kind of what your game plan is, how much risk you're willing to take, how much money you're willing to kind of put into this to get the data. And I think it's in a slide later, but you'll hear us repeat this numerous times. You have to be patient, because you have to get data to make decisions.
Yeah, well, what I'll say is sort of to complement that is like the data will eventually say like what your conversion rate is, and you can make a decision on it. The problem is that it might take a year or $1,000 or something to do that. So as a business owner, you're bound by time and money. So you might have to make that decision before the data would be able to play out and tell you.
Right, and so the science guy, right, keeps saying, no, there's not enough data, the art guy is like, wait a minute, man, I've already spent all this money, and from what I've seen, most of your cost loss, like where you're losing your money, is when you start looking for clicks and no sales. And typically within your search term report, when you do that, you have a ton of 1-2 clicks, right? And that's what's driving kind of a lot of potential wasteful spending. And so there's not enough data with 1 or 2 clicks spread out across a lot of different search terms for you to ultimately make a decision of what works and what doesn't. And, you know, there's no perfect solution to this, but I do think that if you have really good keywords, and when I say really good keywords, I mean that you don't shoot for hundreds of keywords, you shoot for a core set of keywords. And we've been suggesting somewhere between 8 and 15, okay? Just because you have to give a number, and if you don't give a number, people get confused. And we showed that earlier, right? We showed that earlier with apple slicer, apple cutter, apple, but I don't need to call it an apple slicer cutter. If you can actually do those keywords right, then your impressions actually start to flow to the search terms properly. If you actually do the keywords wrong, then your impressions don't actually make any sense and they start stealing from each other. Because if I have apple slicer and apple slicer cutter, how does Amazon know whether a search term should be part of one or part of the other if it's a broad phrase match for that? Does that concept make sense? Because that's really where this whole thing starts. And if you start with the good set of keywords, you get better data from your search terms, right? So I shared the example earlier of the individual who was selling a product, and her search terms were too generic. So like for the apple slicer, I guess the best way to say it is instead of calling it an apple slicer, she called it an apple, and she called it a slicer, right? So her keywords were these one-word, super generic keywords, and she's like, but look at all the impressions that I'm getting. Your system doesn't work. And our system being Ignite is what was not working. And it's like, no, it's not Ignite that's the problem. It's that you started off with bad keywords, so your impressions are all kind of worthless impressions because they're not actually tied to your keywords. And so you can't get the data that you need to actually make a decision.
Long way of saying that sometimes it's complicated, right?
Yes.
So you gotta
well,
figure it out.
it's important.
Yeah. Well, that's
Sometimes,
why
as in every day.
you got to understand like how the system works, so you can understand how to interact with it. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So you've set a goal of your ACOS of 25%. And is that something that has to be reset over time? Let's say that you have a new product, you're introducing it, you say you're gonna acquiesce and say I'm gonna break even or lose money the
Sure.
first 90 days. If I set a goal of 10%, it's still going to be active and go towards that goal.
Yeah. So just to summarize, to restate your question, you're asking if number one, does your ACOS goal change over time? I guess is the first part of it, right? So different parts of your of an ASIN's history you might have different goals, right? If you're launching a campaign, you might be fine with 100% ACOS because you just need to get some sales velocity and it's okay to pay more for it. Whereas if you're longer in the sales, your product's been for sale for a while, you've got history, your goal in advertising at that point is to drive additional sales. And so you want to make sure that those sales are not like losing you money. So you want your ACOS to be less than your profit margin so that you're not losing money on them. So definitely you can change that ACOS over time. Right now what Ignite allows you to do is just like set one ACOS for the product. And if you change it from 25% to 10%, like the next day's suggestions will be at the 10% level. So
The suggestion will help define.
yeah, so the way the Ignite stuff works right now is the suggestions are run each day after all your data is pulled in, and it would make suggestions to lower your bids, assuming your bids were needed to be lowered, and then it's going to be a little bit cautious about that, so it's not going to say like lower your bid 40% all in one day. It says lower it by I think 10 or 15% each week until you get down to where it needs to be. So we built some of that logic into there. Some of this we got room for improvement, and we're making better suggestions as well too. So we're keeping track of every time you hit accept and every time you hit reject, and we're paying attention like, oh, people rejected this one when it was at 80% confidence, but they were accepting it when it was at 90% confidence. So we're saving all that data to make better suggestions as well. So let me see if I think I'm out of time. So we have the suggestions for creating negative keywords. We have suggestions for increasing your bid, for decreasing your bid, for archiving keywords, and then you can use the confidence and importance to kind of select what you need. Our ideal situation would be one where you sort of log into Ignite like once a week or so, and then go through all the suggestions and just say, I went through all my suggestions, I'm good. If you still want to dig into all the detail, you can do that as well, and you can find all those search term reports and everything. But that's kind of where we want, our ideal situation would be one where we can surface those decisions that you need to make. Once we've got enough relevant data, we can surface and say, hey, you need to make a decision, and you can decide whether or not you want to do it. It still helps right now to to still have a good depth of knowledge around how all this stuff works, because it's not intelligent enough yet to be able to automate everything for you. But that's our goal, hopefully. I want to talk just a minute about AMS as well. Well, I had a slide here about trying to optimize your goals. Like you tend to figure out how to minimize your ACOS is one sort of optimization thing. A lot of times when you're talking about optimizing a campaign, you're trying to find search terms that don't generate revenue. So you're looking for things that cost you money, that you pay for clicks, that don't generate very many sales. So trying to take those out, which makes your ACOS go down. We try to reduce bids if you have really expensive keywords, and trying to identify search terms that we can create into more exact match things. Those are all sort of the optimization steps we have. And then we've got some specifics there. I think I'd rather just address those kind of on a question and answer basis. What else do we have that's really useful? So
I think jump into AMS for a couple minutes.
I wanted to get over to AMS. I think it's right here. So for those of you that are using AMS, you're probably already familiar with some of these. If you're not using AMS, you have to have a vendor account, so either Vendor Central or Vendor Express account to run AMS ads. But AMS ads are really pretty powerful. So the top part I have right here, so I searched for the word soda, and you can see the top part up here where it says Pepsi and it has the 3 Pepsi products next to it. That's a headline search ad, and you pay for those through AMS. Now there may also be sponsored product ads down in the body too, so this page could just be full of ads. But the headline search ads there are ads that are available through as a vendor. So if you're interested in those, sometimes they're more expensive, sometimes they're less expensive. It depends on your category and the competition. But it's a really good option to look into because it's really good placement on the page, on the search results page. The requirements for that is you do have to have at least 3 products to fill in the three slots there. And so you have to have 3 products that work for a search term in order to do that. But that's done at the keyword level, similar to how sponsored products are run. They also have a product search thing. I couldn't find an example of the product search, but it's essentially right underneath the buy box. You'll see an ad underneath the buy box sometimes that says, this is another thing you can possibly buy for it. That's a placement you can bid on a per ASIN basis. So if you have competitors, you can actually bid on a competitor's page right underneath the buy box, which is...
It's also a great place to bid on complementary products.
Complementary products is one thing.
Right. So that's what a lot of. So if you have an accessory to a camera, you attach it to the camera that people they also bought with. Yep. That's a great use of that.
Those are very, very generally like a lot less expensive than other things because it's not great placement, but it's usually pretty inexpensive for those product search.
I think you have a question in the back.
We don't have AMS built into anything yet, so that's on our short-term roadmap, but it's going to be a little bit before we do that. So,
I just wanted to add 2 things on AMS. So it seems to be like there was a change recently where it used to be that if you wanted to get AMS, you needed to go on Vendor Express and kind of like give Amazon a product. You don't need to do that right now. So if you don't have AMS, you can sign up for it. Just sign up for Vendor Express and then go in AMS and you can sign up. And then just a second tip is you can bid for a display ad, bid on your own product and show either a different product or your own so that somebody else doesn't take up that space on your ASIN. So.
Yeah, so what Liron is saying is that there used to be kind of I guess a gray hack that you would go and create a Vendor Express account. You would basically create a purchase order with Amazon, but you would never fulfill that purchase order, and a lot of people didn't feel comfortable with that. And I think what you're saying is you don't have to do that anymore. If you just have a Vendor Express account, you can start doing AMS. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier, that advertising is moving to a central platform, right? They want Seller Central and Vendor Central customers to all spend as much money on the platform as possible. They are not going to discriminate based on where you sell.
Yeah, I actually had a call with the AMS team the other day, and he was like, I don't really know if you can advertise products that you aren't selling through the vendor account. And we were saying, well, you definitely can. We don't know if that's
ultimately,
intent, but
and that's the one thing we always tell people. The people that know the least about this are the people at Amazon.
yeah.
Like Brandon and I were asking questions, to sponsored products team, and they were coming back to us, and they were like, well, but we don't understand. Why would your customers want to use it that way? And it wasn't like they were fishing. They really just didn't know, and we were like, I don't know. Maybe they don't want to use it that way. We won't tell you guys anything.
So anyway, we did get the AMS team did say, like, we understand that people have these hybrid solutions, and we know that people bid on
Yeah.
they bid on products that aren't selling to the vendor side on their seller side. So
Hey,
Eric,
Jeff,
Eric looks like he's got something really important.
I just want to echo what Brandon said about Sparkle, which is what you call headline search. Amazon's had this for years. The idea that you can get access to this and buy it is sort of, is pretty incredible. And everyone in here that pay, I don't know if that was the last slide or the one before, but if you have a way to get Sparkle, you want this. You are effectively buying and pushing down every natural search result. So this is really, if you're a brand that sells to Amazon, this is sort of back to what I was saying, there are advantages to sell to Amazon. This is a key one, being able to be at the top of search like this. And the other thing is, just to complement what Jeff just said, there's about to be a lot more money coming into this, and Amazon knows it. So just, if you're not thinking in a technical, strategic way about this, using a tool like this, I highly recommend moving very quickly to start to build an understanding. How do I take my keywords? How do I use a strategic way to get a keyword and turn it into my product? How do I keep people off my product page?
This goes back to what, this goes back to what Karina said earlier, right? This is the new normal. If you're not doing sponsored product ads, you're now falling behind. 6 months ago, you were ahead. This is the new normal.
And I'd say the headline Sparkle ads are the same way. Like,
Right, that's the next,
if you're doing that today, you're ahead of the curve.
right. You're ahead of the curve if you're doing the AMS stuff, and within 6 months, that will be the new normal. That's, Amazon Lives.